Welcome back to America's Mom. I am your host, Sharona Bishop. Thank you for being with us today. It's critical, the conversations and the topics that we're addressing, because they affect you. They impact your everyday life, they impact your children, and they're impacting our future and our liberties here in this great country. It is the greatest country that has ever existed. God has certainly shed his light on this nation, and it's up to us to secure it and protect it. Our show today is an important conversation. It's important to remember what has happened, what's transpired over the last 3.5 years, as we watch Steve Bannon being the most recent victim of lawfare under the Biden regime, and the reality that he's going to literally be spending the entire rest of the election in prison starting July 1, all for supposedly conspiring with the president. I want to talk about this for just a moment, because Steve Bannon was an advisor. Remember that. He was an advisor to President Trump. What do advisors do? They talk about everything. We talk about every potential situation, how to overcome any objections, how to get around anything, how to support the president or the person that you're working with. What does a consultant do? They are there to be for the benefit of the client. And that's exactly what Steve Bannon did. Even though Steve Bannon had nothing to do with January 6th, was nowhere near President Trump during those last few months, he is being treated like a criminal. He is being treated as though he were one of the January 6th attendees. And as we're watching Hunter Biden go into his mockery, his circus of a trial where you all know he's going to be found not guilty. You all know that's what's going to happen. It really highlights the weaponization and the lawfare that's happening against those who have dared to support not just President Trump, but America first. In fact, in the write-up regarding Steve Bannon and the judgment against him, it was clear in the very last paragraph of the national write-up in AP News that Steve Bannon was being persecuted not because he did anything wrong, because he simply connected the people to the MAGA movement and continued the American spirit, the Make America Great agenda after President Trump was out of office. That is what they're coming after him for. And they're going to come after everybody who has dared to take a stand, who's dared to be public, who dares to show up in bodily form and say, I support the America First agenda. I've never been a Trumper. I don't even own a MAGA hat. I almost bought one last week and I could not give into the trend. I just can't do it. I'm not a trendy person. But I do support 1,000% a president who says America must come first and whose policies have actually advocated for that. But this tyrannical regime under the Biden administration is literally targeting and going after every single person who dares to say otherwise, who dares to believe they're free, who dares to believe they have the liberty and the right to attend the People's House in Washington, D.C. and take a stand for their beliefs, to be able to address their grievances to a government, to be able to peacefully assemble. This regime is not going to stop until they have locked up every single person they believe has made it difficult for them to take over and subvert America. With that in mind, my guest today has been through it. 3 years he has spent in jail or prison defending himself because of the weaponization, the targeted appointing of anyone who dared to show their face on January 6th at Capitol Hill. Steve Bannon's a big character. He's a big figure. He's a big name. Everybody knows him. He's got lots and lots of lawyers. And Steve Bannon is going to prevail because he has that physical public presence. But what about those who don't? What about the forgotten men and women that actually that Trump ran for, that actually showed up that day on January 6th because somebody stood up for them? Somebody remembered them. Those forgotten men and women right now are sitting and rotting away in jail cells from over-sentencing because of this, again, this attack, this literal focusing on those who support President Trump and making America great again versus supporting or just being quiet, sitting back and shutting your mouth and not doing anything political. And we can't afford that. So those forgotten men and women, we're going to highlight them. We're going to talk about them. We're going to share their stories. And we're going to share their concerns, because there are some that have weaponized the January 6th movement against our own people. They're hijacking it and pretending to be the face of it. And some of those people actually do deserve jail time. Some of those people do deserve to be sitting in prison right now, but not the majority and not my guest today. Tim Hale joins us on America's Mom to discuss his experience, his background, what happened to him on January 6th, and the 3 years that you spent incarcerated. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharona. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to go back to the beginning. I want people to know about you. One of the things that stood out to me about you on January 6th is that you showed up that day in a suit and tie. clearly going to support President Trump. Why did you wear a suit and a tie on January 6th?
Well, I didn't know that the attire of the day was supposed to be body armor. I went because, well, one, I just like suits, but two, frankly, I thought it was going to be a historic day, and it ended up being one, just not in the way that I had hoped. In the back of my head, the idea was going to be that it was going to be the last. It was going to be the last public speech of his presidency, or it would be the beginning of an amazing new second term. And unfortunately, it ended up being historical for different reasons, but that was my reasoning. So I went in a suit and tie. I actually went out the night before. I had my overnight shift. Right before that shift, I went to Men's Warehouse and I got some brand new dress shoes. Very uncomfortable walking around in D.C., but I wanted to look mighty dapper. So that's the reason.
I love that because you were showing the greatest honor and respect to our country, to our president, and I know that many people felt the same way. This is a historic moment. Millions of people felt the same way, actually, that showed up that day. They felt the same way. I love how you put that, either the last speech he was going to give or the start of a new presidency. That's exactly what we all were believing in our heads. Why, you're from New Jersey, and you've had a very lively life. You've served our country. You've gone on to work as a union leader, and yet you still were a huge supporter of President Trump. Can you kind of explain why you supported Trump in the first place? What was it about him? Because your life's a lot different than mine. I'm a pretty regular person. I don't really have anything extensive to talk about my background, but I supported Trump, not like, again, I'm not a Trumper. I never was, but I supported his policies 100%. What was it about him and your life that you wanted to support this guy? You thought he was the right man for the job?
I could go down the populist road and say that for my entire adult life, and I think for many generations before that, anybody who had a voice outside of the false paradigm of left and right or the two-party system was always just relegated to obscurity. And so, when was the last time a third-party candidate was even viable? Ross Perot, I think.
Well, even Ron Paul. You remember that with Ron Paul, literally MSNBC removed. He was in second place, and they literally just wouldn't report it, wouldn't put it up on the screen. That's a really great point you're making. They've never been able to break through.
Any alternative voice, whether they were, a populist, a paleo-conservative. Pat Buchanan was a strong voice for the paleo-conservative, the old right voice. But of course, any dissident voices were stomped out by the neo-conservatives and the neoliberals. But it's not just about being a dissident voice. It's in terms of the party structure. It's really just about a reflection of the values that I think that, and I think most Americans think, have totally been lost and abandoned. It used to be that, go on a little history lesson here, after the Civil War, when the two-party system kind of broke down, you had the Populist Party, and they arose in the Midwest because the Republicans and the Democrats kind of didn't care about the interests, the local suffering of Midwestern farmers. And that's sort of a reflection of what's gone on in the modern age with globalism and globalization, is that, I think Donald Trump is a reflection of the fact that the average American is not living the good life that the elites have been selling us. And you can blame Clinton for NAFTA or Bush for NAFTA or whatever. You could blame all of them, and you should. But it's more than economics. It's about the perpetual wars. I joined the military out of high school. I was a teenager, and I actually, even further than that, 9/11 happened when I was 11 years old. So at the time, we'd been at war, for 20 years, Donald Trump was a breath of fresh air. He said things in a manner that, the average person could get behind. There was no BS. There was no, having to interpret the words. He spoke like a regular person. The ability to communicate. This is what I've always thought, is that a sign of intelligence is being able to say a lot with less words. Being able to just have him answer a question, maybe not politically correct, but that was always superior than having just the word salad come out of both party politicians' mouths. Donald Trump is a reflection of not anxiety, not resentment. He is a reflection of the popular will, and that's why they're trying to destroy him so hard. Because ultimately, the people in charge don't want to hear it. They don't care about us, and he does. And it's ironic that the billionaire is the guy who turns down all the moneyed interests. It's ironic that the guy who has it made, the guy who could retire tomorrow to his supermodel wife and his giant estate, he could leave politics behind tomorrow, and he could live the rest of his life in perfect peace and harmony. But he chooses to do this for us, and that's admirable, and it's a sign of true leadership. And it's something that's absolutely absent.
Tim, was there any particular moment in his term, 2016 to 2020, that you said, that's my guy and I'm sticking by him no matter what happens? Was there any particular thing that he did, policy he passed, or event that happened that just made you go, I'm sticking with him?
To be perfectly frank, I was with him before he came down the escalators. Donald Trump, I mean, everybody remembers Donald Trump from, he did cameos in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or he was in Home Alone, But Donald Trump has always been a public personality. I remember him going on, radio shows and stuff like that. I mean, he hasn't changed. He's the same guy. And so I remember when he would go on Howard Stern, and I remember when he would go on these shows, and he would badmouth Bush, and he was again the Iraq War and stuff like that. There's something refreshing about having somebody in there who you could just be like, you know what, screw it, get this guy in there. And again, it's not merely about being a protest vote. It's really about just giving a voice to the people who don't have a voice. And look, I'm not naive. The presidency is one office. The president doesn't control everything, but it did send a message, and it has totally shifted. It has absolutely shifted the Overton window. He owns the Republican Party. Now, they're all backstabbing, dishonest, and disloyal, you-know-whats.
Boy, are they. At the
end of the day, though, he's captured the hearts of the people. And so when he started at 1%, okay, here's a real answer. It's not philosophy. The real answer is during those damn debates, when he was tearing apart everybody on those debates, that was so funny. Honestly, my favorite moments of Trump from 2016 were when he was destroying the Republicans on stage. Those debates were actually better than the ones against Hillary Clinton.
I know. I was like, why does this feel so good? It feels so good to see someone tear apart a political science major who's been telling us for years that we need to just like what they're doing to us, that it's the right thing to do to all the people. It was really incredible. I thought back, so you were 11 years old on September 11th, and I was 19 or 20 on September 11th, 2001. So I guess I was 21. And I remember just being so brainwashed and being like, let's go to war, let's kill them all. Like, I can't believe it. I'm very embarrassed by that I didn't stop to critically think about what was going on, what was going to be happening, how impossible the whole situation was, by the way. I never stopped to think about any of that. We were so brainwashed just to go and kill. That's that Neo that you're talking about, just wanting to go out and destroy and kill. And for me, when I think about you being in the service, my brother served honorably, my sister-in-law just retired. My family has had an extensive history of being in the military, but they just send us all off to die. They send our best men off to die for what? Well, obviously for money, but under Trump, we really had no wars. He was not willing to sacrifice one human life. So not only the punching of the Republicans and the neocons there, but the fact that he literally did everything, his negotiating power, his ability to talk with people, to save lives, literally, and not create any more chaos and displacement of human beings. They're, perpetuating human trafficking and exploitation of children and women. He really practiced what he said he believed, and that was extremely meaningful to me personally. I couldn't believe it, and I've had to really repent, honestly, of my years of just accepting what the Republican Party told me to believe and start thinking for myself. It's why you're such a refreshing person. Listen, we're going to be back in just a minute. We have to take a hard break. We ran a little bit long there, but we are with Tim Hale. He has been a victim. He doesn't like to say it that way, but I'm going to say it that way. He was a victim of this lawless judicial system who targeted those who attended January 6th, and he's telling his story here with us on America's Mom. We'll be right back. Welcome back to America's Mom. We are talking with Tim Hale today. He was there on January 6th, and the government chose to weaponize and abuse an American citizen like Tim Hale. It's happening to many others, but he is here to share his story with us today. And it's so great to have you with us, Tim. I don't want the people to forget what has happened, what has gone on, what the federal government has done to its own citizens, the overcharging, the abuse of our people, especially those in the Patriot or America First movement. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you again for having me. What's interesting is that there are a lot of fan favorites among the Democratic Party who skip congressional hearings, and they don't end up getting 4 months in prison. I want to say this is. I do want to focus on the January 6th defendants who are locked up, but I also want to give credit where credit is due. There were a few people who cared about us when we first got locked up. When we were in solitary, most people couldn't care whether we were alive or dead. And there were a few people who spoke out in favor for us. And one of the earliest voices actually was Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon was, he had my aunt on War Room. He promoted Patriot Freedom Project. And Steve's a fighter, and I know he's going to get through it. He shouldn't have to, but if he's listening, I do want him to know that I haven't forgotten. I don't think anybody who was in there, during our 1 hour of recreation a day out of our cells, when we were able to get a hold of one of those crappy little black tablets. If we were able to watch War Room, we were watching War Room, and taking down the CCP. I mean that people lived for that. It might sound corny, but that taking down the CCP
I live for that, Tim.
that made people's day. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. I want to give a shout out to Steve Bannon. It's wrong what they're doing to him. Obviously, it's political. They're doing it to all of us, and it's frankly, it's so blatant that this is just an attempt to suppress a popular voice before an election. They don't even care. They're not even trying to hide it, and so
not even trying.
Not at all.
Which tells you that they have full control. It tells you that they're not afraid of getting caught. They're not afraid of anybody retaliating. They're not afraid of pushback because they own the judiciary, they own the executive branch, they own the legislative branch. As much as we think Congress is, we've got a majority there, Mike Johnson is still failing to do what he was put there to do, what he voted in to do. So it's going to be curious to watch and see what happens. War Room, Bannon, he's an absolute patriot. But you are also a patriot. And if you can just tell us briefly what happened on January 6th. I know we want to get to those who've been left behind, and also, again, the exploitation by some who were there that day, who are really using it for their own advantage and own purposes. We're going to talk about that too. But give us just the rundown. What happened to you on January 6th? How did you end up being How did you end up being a victim of this?
Sure. So I was at the Ellipse listening to the Trump speech. It was early that day, and then towards the end, people start walking in caravans down the streets. So you got Constitution Ave, I guess Pennsylvania Ave, whatever. People are walking towards the Capitol building. Okay, but what people don't realize is that a half hour before everybody gets to the Capitol building, there were already people there knocking over barriers, and so you could say there was a trap being set. And that's pretty much what happened. Is you had five Capitol Police were guarding the perimeter of the Capitol building. I mean that's absolutely insane. You have this massive area, and again, people don't realize how much is left out of the narrative, how much they're not seeing. You're not seeing the fact that there's yeah, like there's actually fencing getting cut down and rolled up and removed from the area. You have no trespassing signs or whatever, restricted area signs that are being removed. So thousands and thousands of people flooded into the area, having no idea they weren't allowed there. And so when the cops
why was it removed? Who cut them down and who removed the signs?
That's a good question. We don't know all their identities. You have one, they call him Bulwark Fence Cutter. You have a guy they call the Tower Commander. Again, these are like corny little sedition hunter hashtags or whatever. But it's worth noting that a lot of key people go unidentified, but they're able to hunt down grandmas. So it really begs the question: how much of this was coordinated and who coordinated? Now I have video. I mean, it's circumstantial evidence, but I have more than enough video to show there was coordination between teams of people on the inside and outside of the Capitol building. And that means, the idea that a random protester would be able to orchestrate that is just nonsense. So it wasn't an insurrection. Trump didn't tell us to go fight the cops. It did not happen. Quite the opposite. But there was, again, I always say this: don't fall for the Hegelian dialectic. Don't fall for the false paradigm of they're all insurrectionists or they're all super duper Trump patriots. It's very complicated. There were a lot of suspicious actors in there, and we shouldn't trust any narratives that come out of this, especially going into the election. They've been building this stupid narrative for 3 years. It hasn't gained traction. It's actually lost traction. But you never know what they're going to pull out of whatever. And so, that's basically what happened. People walked in there thinking they're at a First Amendment protest. I've released video from my phone. You can go to my Twitter and see it. People are just chanting USA and they're singing God Bless America. These are just normal people.
Tim, what's your Twitter? I want everybody to be heading over there. Maybe we can add that on the bottom of the screen, producer. What is your Twitter so people can go and keep track of all of this?
Sure. You can find me at Tim Hale, criminally funny J6er. And yeah,
it is amazing to me. You're able to really explain. Your writings are incredible. I know you've got some things in the works for the future to explain more of what happened, but you're very detailed and articulate about what actually was going on there and what was happening in the jails at the time as well. You spent a year with certain people, that Jake Lang, that people have publicly talked about. Recently, Jake Lang was exposed to the video of him taking a baseball bat with a gas mask on to police. And he's somewhat become the face of the January 6ers out there raising money, but this was never really discussed. The fact that he actually was violent with the police, literally pursuing them, and then celebrating afterwards in another video that you've posted up also, just showing us exactly what happened that day. I'm very concerned about that. So when you say don't believe the narrative, is that what you're referring to, that everybody deserves to be let off for January 6th? Because, again, we saw a video of people literally going and beating the crap out of officers. I can't ignore that.
Yeah, that's certainly part of the narrative. And granted, he's a big proponent of it. And so while I always make this point, a lot of people talked a lot of crap because they were upset because they thought that they lost their country. And so,
Sure. Of course, true.
Keep in mind, like 3 year later, when you're still saying this is 1776, and literally that fool is posting that he's starting another militia. He just posted this, or I'm saying, it's like, it's just, if you fall for it at this point, it's kind of your fault. But people don't even realize that after January 6th, he was accused of trying to start a militia to overthrow the government. He's in the jail with us, and he's trying to enlist all of us, the veterans especially. He's trying to entrap us with a militia. I found paperwork. Some dude's paperwork has his name in it. They found him through his cloud information, through his militia. And now again, he's still promoting he's going to start a constitutional national militia across the country with different chapters and stuff like that. This is a Fed honeypot. There's no way around it. But it's kind of transparent if you know what to look for. He's an anarchist. The guy who gave him the baseball bat was a communist, Josiah Kenyon. These are people who are trying to keep in mind, he's doing this stuff in front of cameramen. There's literally camera crews right around him waiting for him to do it. It's kind of obvious what it is. He even pulls out his cell phone. He's recording himself giving a Braveheart speech to the cops, and then the idiot, I guess he fat fingers the button and he turns it off. He's like, oh man, so he messed that up. But whatever. He's one dude. Unfortunately, and this is what people, again, I'm not throwing shade at like any particular defendant, but here's my perspective is like, we have to be very careful about deifying political prisoners. because that's exactly the kind of people they will compromise or might already be compromised. Because you have no idea. I mean, there's Sam Lazar, Zach Alam. There are so many defendants who aren't what they appear as, and so we have to be very careful about putting people on a pedestal and then, I don't know, giving them the nuclear codes theoretically. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't really. The truth is, like, I always make this point. I keep saying that I always make this point, but I do always make this point, which is this: if we are who we say we are, then we're just random nobodies. We got entrapped, and that's it. We're not celebrities. We shouldn't be famous. But then there's some people, some are, and it's a little weird, And it's like AstroTurf. It's just like it just comes out of nowhere, and they get.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So you got to be very careful about that.
I do. There is this element of the population, and I would say I would be one of those, that I have to, again, kind of fight against the brainwashing of just grabbing onto something and holding onto it and feeling virtuous because I'm supporting that, instead of doing real work, which is making sure that these people are being taken care of, like Patriot Freedom Project actually takes care of the families that have been left behind because of the weaponization of government against those who attended January 6th. So I completely agree with you, and I think there's been this big push of Trump needs to make sure to, allow everyone to get off the hook. I cannot think of what that word is. What is that word? Pardon, thank you. That he needs to pardon every single person who was at January 6th. And in all fairness, I don't think that that's accurate. I don't think that's true. And yet there were people who were killed that day by the violence, by police brutality, and we don't forget that either. So as you said, it's a lot more complicated than just everybody was right and then everybody there at the Capitol was wrong. It is a little bit more complicated than that. But tell me about those who are the real ones, who are the people that need our support, deserve to be remembered. Can you share some of their stories with us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, where to begin? I made a long thread on Twitter about the Oath Keepers. And look, to be fair, I'm not omniscient. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that the feds tried to infiltrate a lot of militia groups, But in terms of the people that I met, Kenneth Harrelson, Jessica Watkins, and Kelly Meggs, they got railroaded. There's no way to there's no other way to to see it. They were there for a security job. They made it over to the Capitol building. They went inside. They left. They actually protected Officer Dunn, the Slav who actually tried to build a political career in Maryland off of lying under, he lied under oath about the Oath Keepers, and now Kelly Meggs has a 12-year sentence. Jessica Watkins has over an 8-year sentence because he lied. All of these, and that's another thing. Again, if it's not the defendants themselves, you got to worry about these Capitol Police because they're trying to become famous too. You always have to watch out for this mockingbird stuff, where we put these people on pedestals. It is really
weird. I agree with that. It's a little strange to see the Capitol Police trying, like this was their one moment, their 5 minutes of fame.
Right.
And the truth is going to come out. And Tim, you're providing the truth to the people. We're all going to be together on June 20th at Bedminster. I can't wait. We're going to be doing a sit-down interview with you and just dialing into more of the details and facts of this whole experience and what the American people need to know and understand in order to make good judgments about who they're supporting and what they're supporting. So I can't wait for that. But where can people find you and support you? I can't believe that just flies by talking with you. But again, where can people find you, support you? I live for that. I like it when people talk a lot. It saves me from asking so many questions. But we want them to know where they can dial in and hear firsthand your account. 3 years you've spent between jail and prison. You're out now. You're telling the truth about what really went on. And I want people to be able to know the truth so they can be set free.
Sure. I'm on Twitter. You can find me under Tim Hale, criminally funny, J6er. If you want to support the families, you can go to patriotfreedomproject.com and hashtag free Bannon, hashtag free the J6ers, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for being with us. And we're going to be right back with another great guest today here on America's Mom.